The line at the supermarket was nothing unusual, just another afternoon filled with chatter and the steady beeps of scanned groceries. But when the man in the tailored suit reached the register, everything shifted. The sleek black card in his hand was swiped once, then again, and then the screen lit up with a word no one expected. Declined. For a heartbeat, the store seemed to freeze. Shoppers behind him smirked. Whispers spread quickly, and the cashier threw back her head in laughter, sharp, cruel, merciless. The man's eyes dropped to the floor, his jaw clenched tight. Beside him, a little boy tugged gently at his hand, looking up with wide, anxious eyes. Nobody knew who this man truly was. Nobody knew the immense fortune tied to his name. And nobody could have guessed that in this humiliating moment, the kindness of a child was about to alter everything. If you believe in compassion, second chances, and the quiet power of humanity, please like this video, subscribe to Boundless Echoes, and share this story with someone who needs hope. Your support keeps these stories alive. The man's name was Jonathan Reed, a billionaire who had built his empire through steel, construction, and sheer determination. He had stood in glass towers, commanded boardrooms filled with the most influential men in the nation, and his name was etched into skyscrapers in New York and beyond. But here, in this small-town grocery store, none of that mattered. Stripped of status and wealth, he was simply a man whose card had failed. It wasn't a bank error. It wasn't a fraud. It was fate, handing him a lesson in the harshest, most humbling way possible. For years, Jonathan had hidden behind his power, rarely pausing to see the struggles of ordinary people. Now he stood exposed, humiliation pressing down on him. The cashier laughed again, louder this time, making sure everyone heard. People in line leaned forward, eager to watch. Some pointed, some chuckled, savoring the spectacle of a man who looked important falling apart. The little boy at Jonathan's side, no older than 7, with tousled hair and a faded blue shirt, looked at the groceries on the belt, then at the crowd. He didn't see a billionaire. He saw a man breaking under the weight of shame. And then, as if moved by something beyond himself, he did the unimaginable. With trembling fingers, he reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 crumpled bills and a few coins. It wasn't much, the kind of money a child gathers from allowance or loose change found beneath couch cushions. Slowly he stretched his hand toward the cashier. The store fell silent again, but for a different reason this time. Whispers died. Laughter evaporated. All eyes fixed on the little boy as he placed his coins on the counter, whispering that he wanted to help pay for the man's groceries. Jonathan froze. A billionaire who had once written checks larger than some families earned in a lifetime now stood speechless. His heart, hardened by decades of ambition, felt something he hadn't allowed in years: humility. His eyes burned, not with anger but with tears he tried to hold back. This child, with nothing, had given him everything: dignity, compassion, and a reminder of what true wealth really was. The atmosphere shifted. Shame spread among the crowd. Some lowered their heads, embarrassed that they had laughed at another man's pain, while a child had shown courage and kindness. Even the cashier's grin faltered into awkward silence. When the groceries were finally packed, Jonathan bent down to the boy's level, his voice breaking as he thanked him. The boy didn't know the name etched on skyscrapers, didn't care about billions. To him, Jonathan was simply a man in need, and kindness demanded action. That evening, Jonathan didn't return to his limousine waiting outside. Instead, he walked the boy home, curious about where he came from. The house was small, its paint peeling, the porch sagging with age. Inside, the boy's father worked hard at the table, fixing a broken appliance while keeping an eye on a pot simmering on the stove. Life here was simple, filled with small battles and quiet victories. Jonathan was welcomed without judgment, And for the first time in years, he saw the quiet dignity of people living with so little, yet giving so much. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. The image of the boy offering his last coins stayed with him. For years, he had measured wealth in numbers and possessions. But now he realized that true wealth was in kindness, giving when you had little to give, and seeing humanity when others saw weakness. The very next morning, he made a decision. Weeks later, headlines across the country carried the news. Jonathan Reed, the once ruthless billionaire, had launched a massive foundation dedicated to helping struggling families. Grocery bills were quietly paid in towns across America. Homes were repaired. Scholarships were granted to children who never dreamed of college. But more than money, Jonathan himself walked grocery aisles, visited homes, listened to stories he once ignored. At the heart of it all was a little boy in a blue shirt, the child who had handed him 3 crumpled bills. Jonathan made sure that boy and his family never wanted for anything again. Yet he didn't parade the child's act as charity. He protected it, honored it, and turned it into a legacy of compassion. Years later, when people spoke of Jonathan Reed, they didn't talk about skyscrapers or billions. They spoke about the day his card declined and a child's kindness changed his heart. That was his true legacy, not written in steel or money, but in compassion. If this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to Boundless Echoes, and share it with someone who needs reminding that kindness can transform the world. And before you go, tell us, would you have done what the little boy did? Share your thoughts in the comments, because true wealth is not measured by bank accounts or credit cards. It is measured by the courage to show kindness when others don't, by the strength to reach out when others look away, and by the hope found in the smallest gestures. That little boy, with nothing in his pocket but everything in his heart, reminded us all that compassion has no price tag. And sometimes the smallest voices teach the loudest lessons. Carry that truth into your life, into your family, into your everyday choices. Be the person who lifts others when they're down, who gives even when it feels impossible, who believes in humanity even when the world feels cold. Years passed, and the story of Jonathan Reed and the little boy in the faded blue shirt became a quiet legend told in small towns and big cities alike. It wasn't broadcast as a scandal or a spectacle. It lived in whispers, in newspaper clippings pinned to walls, in late-night conversations about the power of kindness. Jonathan's foundation grew far beyond his original vision. Families who had once struggled to put food on the table now had opportunities to build better futures. Children who thought college was just a dream walked across stages with diplomas in their hands. Grocery stores across the country became places of hope, where anonymous acts of kindness continued to ripple outward. But Jonathan himself had changed most of all. He no longer measured his worth in stock prices or the height of towers with his name carved into the stone. Instead, he measured his days by the lives touched, the smiles sparked, and the compassion shared. Where he had once been hardened and unreachable, he now became a man whose presence brought warmth and understanding. The little boy, Ethan Carter, grew up never forgetting the day he offered 3 wrinkled bills to a stranger. He didn't realize, even years later, the magnitude of what he had done. To him it had been simple. Someone was hurting, and he wanted to help. But Jonathan made sure that Ethan's life blossomed in ways that kindness deserved. Ethan went on to study, to travel, and to carry the spirit of that day into every corner of his life. And while the world continued to remember Jonathan Reed as the billionaire who turned his fortune into compassion, Jonathan himself would always point back to Ethan. He often said, "I was wealthy before I met him, but I didn't know what wealth truly was. He was poor in the eyes of the world, but in that moment he was richer than I had ever been. He gave me back my humanity." When Jonathan eventually passed, his legacy was not written in the steel of his skyscrapers, but in the countless lives uplifted by his compassion. And at his memorial, Ethan stood quietly in the crowd, not as a symbol or a figurehead, but simply as the boy who had once believed that kindness mattered. Because it always had, because it always will. And so the story reminds us that no act of kindness is ever too small. A crumpled bill, a few coins, a trembling hand reaching out. Those are the things that can change the course of a life, rewrite the destiny of a man, and awaken a legacy far greater than wealth. True wealth is not counted in dollars, but in moments when hearts choose compassion over cruelty. Jonathan Reed's skyscrapers may fade with time, but the lesson a child taught him in a grocery store will echo forever. If you found this story interesting, please give us a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to support our channel. See you in the next video.